What's up, everyone, and welcome to episode 48 of the Disc and Dice podcast, and a happy new year to all of our listeners. My name is Paul, and I am here with JT.
Hello, hello. Happy New Year, everybody.
And it's just the two of us today as we kick off another year of Disc and Dice. Unfortunately, Timmy couldn't be here with us today, but I'm pretty sure he'll be back for the next one.
Well, you would hope so, right? I mean, we're getting so close to 50. It would be really, really bad of him to just, leave right before then. Sorry, guys. Have a great 50th episode.
That is true. What if he bailed out now and he just, we just went on without him?
Would we know what to do? Would we go on without him? Questions you only know by continuing to listen to the pod.
I'm trying to think. It's like when you're not on the podcast, JT, we usually make up some elaborate ruse or elaborate kind of story for why you're not here, because we know that it's unlikely that you'll listen. So I don't know. I think Timmy probably does. He'll listen to the start at least. So I don't know if we can catch him out like that.
Yeah, true. He'll listen to see if what elaborate ruse we have for the listeners regarding his absence. But I think it was so last minute that we're even a little bit flustered now as to what to make up. So probably not going to happen.
Yeah, that is true. It is all very last minute. We thought we'd have all three of us, but we'll power on nevertheless to obviously talk about some games. And so it's been a while since we actually got an episode out there. It's been at least a month now. So I guess we've got a lot to catch up on, but we've also had that kind of Christmas, New Year period that's passed us by now. And I wanted to ask you, JT, did you get any gaming goodies for Christmas?
I did. I got myself a lot of gaming goodies because
really?
that's sort of just where it's going now, because I get a lot of my stuff on Steam. And you can't exactly hint at someone like, oh, I want a game on Steam, because
that's true.
My partner doesn't have access to Steam, so she's not going to gift me anything off of that. So it really it's a really mundane way of getting presents, but it really just comes down to, hey baby, I'm going to buy the new Doom expansion on Steam. Hope that's all right. Yep, that's fine. Then that's Merry Christmas to me. That being said, though, I installed Forza 7, which I received as a Christmas present back in 2017 or 2018 for the Xbox when that came out, and I only just opened it sort of around this Christmas period, just after Christmas time.
So it's basically like a new gift.
It is, yeah. And I treated it as such. I had a little ceremonial unwrapping of the present because it was still in the shrink wrap. I think I sent a message to you guys basically saying, hey, look what I'm finally playing. So yeah, it was, I guess that's kind of special. I guess I should ask the same question to yourself. What sorts of interactive goodies did you get?
Well, I was given a board game, or maybe a card game, which is called We're Doomed. And I haven't had a chance to play it yet, but it looks like it's one of those sort of real short playtime kind of party game type things. And it's the theme is apocalypse, end of the world type stuff. So
right.
I like the theme of that. I haven't had a chance to play the game yet. It's I took it to a couple of family things over that kind of Christmas period, hoping that we get to bust it out and play, but that didn't end up happening in the end. That's, for reasons that I'll discuss later on. There were different games we ended up playing. But yeah, I've got that sitting here on the shelf next to me and hoping to give that a go sometime. I just need to get minimum 4 people together to try that one.
Good luck. You know how it is trying to get games nights together. Actually, you know what? It's totally fitting. And I just remembered this. We actually started a family Christmas tradition, and it is very much in line with the discussions we have on the pod. Last year, we purchased the Home Alone board game in original wrapping, which came out in 1991. So I think that came, that's the year the film came out, or maybe a year after.
Okay.
And we actually managed to play that on Christmas Day as a family, and we've actually sort of made that the new tradition. Is we won't play it any other time during the year, and we'll play that every Christmas because being a Christmas film, Home Alone,
Yeah.
an old favorite of most people's, I would say. I was actually surprised at how good it was, to be honest. I thought it was going to be quite rubbish, but it's for an old movie license game. Yeah, really not that bad. So, if you can get your hands on a copy, could start a Christmas tradition with your family.
What kind of game is it?
It's actually an asymmetrical, I guess you could call it, it's not really co-op. No, it is co-op. Very similar to something like Mansions of Madness, actually.
Yeah, I can see how that would fit the theme.
Yeah. And it's actually encourages teams of two, even though you're only ever moving one piece at a time. But it's sort of like, because it's a family game, you've got like mum and dad together, brother, sister, or your brothers, or maybe your other family members. They sort of, form your little alliances. And yeah, it sort of works very similar to Mansions of Madness. You've got this house you run around. People take turns controlling the bad guys to catch out other teams.
Yeah.
As well as their own pieces. So, yeah, something sort of original for the time, I think, at least for a movie license game. So, yeah, very interesting.
Does that mean it needs like you can play it with like quite a lot of players if you can have like teams like that?
Yeah, that's right. I think we had one team of 3 because we had like an odd number of people. So we had a team of 3. All playing, but as it's pretty simple to play. I won't go into the nitty gritty of it, but I know there's like a newer version that came out at some point, and so I'm not sure if that's the same sort of deal. It doesn't look like it, but yeah, it's actually quite a rarity to be able to get your hands on it. So yeah, it was a good time at Christmas. Playing through that one, it was pretty good.
We'll look forward to like the yearly Christmas update of how you're min-maxing the Home Alone board game and like the meta game that emerges over the years.
It is funny because I was the rule keeper, so to speak. So I had a quick read of the rules and got everyone into playing the game. And I was winning the game, but it wasn't because I was a rule reader so much as it was that I think I played these sorts of games a lot in the past.
Right.
And so there were a lot of accusations, so cheating. There's like, he read the rules, so he had an advantage. And I'm like, well, the rule book's right there if you want to read them.
Yeah, that's your choice.
There was a lot of that. But I don't think any family board game is really complete without those sorts of little arguments and things. So it's all part of the beauty of it, I think.
That's true. I feel like they also the games that are kind of aimed, like you say, at families, they also seem to be pretty sort of like simple and loose with the rules. That it's why you get stuff like house rules. Like if you're playing like an adult board game, things are pretty strict and you can't really just come up with some house rule. But it's always like the monopolies and the things like that end up with those kind of bespoke rules that people come up with, like games like Uno and things like that. It's always the stuff that's just, it's a little bit slacker on the rules and there's a few more grey areas. And so it's interesting how like people just sort of fill those in with their own rules.
Yeah, just like backyard cricket.
Yeah, speaking of New Year games.
Oh man, what a night, huh?
So yeah, when you mentioned before that some of your sort of holiday gifts were to yourself, I actually also bought myself a holiday gift, you could say, a rather expensive one in a whole brand new PC, which I picked up just earlier this week. And so we thought we'd kind of like kick things off today with a little bit of a chat about new hardware, because I've got a new PC and JT, your family are now the proud owners of a new Xbox Series X. So we thought we'd chat a little bit about some of that new hardware before we jump into like specific games. So yeah, I was way overdue for a new PC. It had been like 6 or 7 years since I last upgraded my entire system. So you always do those like incremental upgrades over the years, but I'd kind of reached that point where to upgrade any part of my PC meant upgrading another part, which meant upgrading another part. And so at that point, the decision was just made to buy a whole new box, basically, rather than
Yeah.
try and kind of squeeze more performance out of what I had.
You end up running into a bottleneck like at every component. So you're like, well, there's nothing I can do right now. So
Yeah, that's kind of the point I got to. I think a new video card was the last thing that I had bought, and I was at that point, at the point I was at before I bought this one that I have sitting here now. Like, I could have gone a new video card again, but I would basically have needed a new motherboard for that, and then my old CPU wouldn't have been compatible. So, everything just goes up and up at that point. So new PC it was, and so I picked that up earlier this week, and I have been having an absolute blast just kind of trying stuff out. Like, I haven't been getting really, really into any one game for the past week or so, because when you have that new PC, you just want to kind of try out a whole bunch of stuff on it. Like, it's not like I kind of load it up and I say, all right, I just want to play this one game for like 20 hours. It's like, I want to download 5 or 10 games, and I want to see how this game runs, and I want to see how good this game looks and things like that. So my week has kind of been a week of just sort of benchmarking my new PC with a bunch of games that I'm interested in seeing how it runs.
yes, yeah, absolutely. And I always love, I mean, even when you do like a small upgrade, like a video card, I always love loading up old games that, used to kill your computer,
Yeah.
and then be able to like max them out, and then, enjoy some of the older stuff that you didn't get to enjoy all the way back when you first got it.
Yeah, like there's a few things like that I've kind of tried out. Like the obvious old one that I'm still playing now is WoW, and it still does surprise me that like WoW is how many years old, and I buy a brand new PC and it's noticeable that WoW looks better. Like, they're still doing enough little graphical tweaks that buying a new PC gets me slightly smoother and slightly prettier WoW, which is always cool.
Yes. Actually, that's one thing, going back into WoW myself, I noticed the shiny water. And it, like reflects everything. And I was like, oh wow, they're really pulling out all the stops for this one.
Yeah, I think they have like some kind of limited ray tracing as well, at least in Shadowlands in the latest WoW expansion. It's like the big shiny new graphical feature. They had to have that involved in some way. I can't say like I've hugely noticed anything like that, but everything does look, a bit kind of crisper and cleaner, which is cool. The other one that I had really been wanting to try, which I don't really have anything to say about as a game for this week's episode, but I have talked about before, is No Man's Sky, because I have had so many technical issues with that game on both my desktop PC and my laptop. And I was really, really keen to load that up on this and see how it runs. And I'm happy to say that I can crank everything up to max and play that one. So I'm really looking forward to giving that a go, because that's been a game that's been like, I've been really wanting to get into that since they've done a whole bunch of additions to it and really fleshed that game out. But it's always just destroyed my PC. It really weirdly, because sort of more like better looking, more intensive games have run fine, while No Man's Sky has just always been a mess. So I'm happy to say that runs very, very smoothly.
Yeah, that's one of the games I think they've put a lot of work into it over the years. Obviously it was like a disastrous launch, and it seems like they've sort of cleaned it up a little bit. So yeah, it's I'm glad to hear that you can finally sort of get past all those technical issues that were sort of making you wary to continue playing it. And yeah, see how it goes as a game that you'll be playing, and maybe we'll hear about that on the pod at some time in the future.
Yeah, that's the plan. The last thing I just wanted to say about the PC specifically is that I think we've kind of talked on and off, both on the pod and off the pod, over sort of the last couple of years about how the sort of visible graphical advances of like PC and maybe especially console tech seems to be kind of diminishing. It's like there is no big generational jump anymore that you really notice. And I found it interesting with my new PC, which is a massive step up from my previous one. I think the thing that has made the biggest difference for me is the monitor, because I've picked up a 2K monitor, which is like way, way above what I had before, which weren't even like 1080p monitors. So I've got a 2K monitor and it's significantly bigger than the ones I had before. And it is just so crisp and vibrant. Like the images just pop and the colors are so like they just look incredible. And I'm still using two monitors, and I have the better of my two old monitors sitting next to it. And when I drag an image between the two screens, the monitor, which a week ago I thought looked fine, genuinely now looks like all the colors have been washed out of it, and it looks like there's some kind of technical issue with that monitor, even though I know it's perfectly fine, just because this new 2K one is such a massive step up. And I gotta say, that's something I didn't expect. Like, I thought all the new hardware in the PC would make a huge difference, but I didn't think that the monitor was going to be such a big deal. And I'm actually really glad I bought it, because that was one of the things that I thought about. Maybe I'll just buy the box and I'll pick up the monitor in a couple of months' time. And there was such a good decision to also get that as well.
Yeah, and I think with the new monitors as well, like they run at this like a higher refresh rate naturally. So I think a lot of the new ones are like 144 hertz instead of 60 is what it used to be the standard. And that's another thing that I noticed looking at other people's monitors is you do notice that difference. I know there's like a lot of debate about like what the human eye can perceive in terms of frames per second.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference between 60 frames a second on a 60 hertz monitor and 144 frames a second on a 144 hertz monitor is very, very noticeable. And so I think when I go into getting my new computer at some point in the future, upgrading the monitor is that's sort of the first thing I think I'm going to be looking at is, making sure that it's making that jump with the refresh rate, because I think it's really important, especially for newer games.
Yeah, I ended up getting a 144 hertz monitor. I was looking at just getting a 60 hertz 2K monitor initially, because they were about $150 cheaper, but I ended up going for the higher refresh rate. And I would say that at the moment I haven't played enough of any one thing to notice it. So some of the stuff I've played, like WoW, seems to be kind of frame locked at 60, so it doesn't push above that, right, as far as I could see. But a bunch of the other stuff I've tried out and it all looks really good, but I probably haven't put enough into anything yet to really notice that. But I have sort of looked at the frames on a few things and seen them pushing up into like 90 or 100 frames, which is, those are new numbers for me.
Yeah, that's right. I've always also thought about the process of buying a new PC is like very similar to buying a new car, because it's, with a console, you've only got like, a lot of people just buy both consoles or whatever's out. They'll just buy them all because they're that much cheaper than like a brand new PC. But a new PC, it's like you're looking at the features, you're looking at like what's inside of it, what kind of, is it like good quality, is it bad quality? That's just something I've always realized, like you've got all those pros and cons that you're constantly chucking up, except you can't really test drive them, which is a bit difficult, but yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to actually talk about that kind of process a little bit, because I find that when I decide to buy a new PC, I basically spend like a week or two learning up on like everything there is to know about where PC hardware is at. And like you and I had some extensive conversations online, sort of going into all the different details about like the socket sizes on the motherboards and trying to make sure that they were kind of future-proofed for like new generations of CPUs and things like that. And I know like you probably keep up with that stuff generally a lot more than I do, but for me, I sort of switch off to PC hardware when I'm not looking at a new PC, and I just kind of completely ignore any new developments. And so it's like a thing every sort of 5 or 6 years. I have this like huge catch up. It's like cramming for an exam or something. Like I just learn everything I can in a short amount of time about where PC hardware is at, what's the best stuff for me to get, and then I buy it. But then I know I'm just going to switch off for like the next 5 years, and I'll have absolutely no idea what happens in terms of hardware.
And stuff is happening all the time. It's so incremental.
Yeah.
And I think that probably matters a lot more to the people who are sort of constantly keeping updated on it are probably more like the PC enthusiasts, like a lot of people who might not game so much as they do, like want to squeeze more performance out of their benchmarks and stuff like that. I think that's where that probably becomes a bit more important in constantly thinking about what the new hardware is. But obviously, when you buy a brand new PC after so long, um, you know, the research is obviously comes in handy. You don't want to get stung by paying too much for a computer or something. So
Yeah, I think I benefited from that sort of. I changed some decisions about things I got based on, probably mainly based on like what would be the best options for being able to upgrade it into the future. Not buying a PC that was going to be difficult to upgrade in 2 or 3 years time if I needed to. So that it's worth it, I think, when you are buying a PC to kind of do that stuff. Like, I guess, and that's, I guess, like you're talking about consoles before, I guess that is something that puts people off in terms of that. Like, that with consoles, it's a very easy purchase, right? Like, it's all there and all the decisions are made. And, like, I can totally get how that is appealing to people. Like, I almost wish that that's how buying a PC was, that there's just new PCs and you just get the new one and everything runs. But, it's like you can't have that and have all the other benefits. So yeah, that's PCs.
that's right. It's a double-edged sword,
It,
always.
it definitely is. Speaking of consoles, though, while I got a new PC, as I said before, I won't say you personally, because I guess it's more of a sort of a family purchase in a way for you. I know that you guys have picked up one of the new Xboxes.
That's right. We finally got an email from JB Hi-Fi after, I don't know, probably about a month of waiting, because we tried to get the first lot, but they obviously sold like hotcakes. So we finally got it. Then we hung on to it until Christmas, because that's when we gave it to my partner's son. Sort of, I guess it's like he actually helped pay for it. He wanted to contribute to it so he could at least say like, well, it's kind of mine. So, you know, all the power to him. I was very different when I was his age, but yeah. And yeah, look, I mean, I'm enjoying it. It's an Xbox. This is the thing. Consoles and console releases, it's just not like it was a long time ago. Like it's really more about platforms than it is the actual machine itself. That's sort of where I've noticed over the past probably few years, like probably since the Xbox One, but I think it sort of started even after that, where the companies were pushing a platforms more than they were a new console. And that's really what this feels like. I mean, if you really want to know the difference between swapping between the Series X from the Xbox One, it's basically nothing, because the platform is the same. The UI is the same. The apps, everything on it, everything's compatible with one another. You're basically just buying I mean, I guess in that regard, it's a little bit like a PC.
Mm-hmm.
You're still using your Windows, you're just using it on different hardware. And that's exactly what this is like. And like, back when your Xbox One first got released, it, had this completely new dashboard, or if you got upgraded to a Xbox 360 or a PS4 from the PS3, that's a new dashboard. You upgrade to, the Xbox One from the Nintendo 64, like Nintendo 64 didn't even have a dashboard. So, I mean, if that's making sense, like previously it was everything was new. Everything was, I wonder what the new Xbox dashboard's gonna look like, or how's the new PS3 gonna look on my, my TV? What's gonna happen with it? That just doesn't really happen anymore. It's just, Xbox is Xbox. I don't know what it's like with the PS5. I'm assuming it's possibly similar. But yeah, look, it runs all the games great. We get to run the enhanced versions of everything now, but since we don't have a 4K TV at the moment, we don't even really see that benefit yet, and that's where a lot of that extra hardware is useful for. It's not necessarily that it's like crazy better graphics so much as it is, it's easier to scale those same graphics up to a larger display size, and that's what the extra power is there for. So that's sort of my thoughts on it. It's definitely not a bad thing, but it's just for anyone who bought it thinking it's going to be this like massive new experience, that's just not it. And even at one thing I really do praise though is so they've got the new controllers. The new controllers are a little bit different. There's like an extra button on there, and they use a different charging port, but it's all completely backwards compatible with the Xbox One. So we've got like 2 Xbox One controllers previously, and I was actually really, really happy to see that on the, when we went to play a 2-player game, we could just sync the old controller straight into the Xbox Series X. We didn't need to buy a new controller, and they work indistinguishably the same from controller to controller. They feel the same. Series X controller does feel a little bit better because it's got a nice grip around it, so you don't get, if you're getting sweaty palms playing, Mysteries of the Sith. Sorry, in joke.
Deep cut.
Yeah, deep cut. Sorry, Butters. Yeah, it's not going to slide out of your hand, and so it's, definitely like a step up in terms of a controller, but as far as comparing the two together, they are basically the same. So yeah, kudos to Xbox for keeping that all, being able to use with one another. And yeah, I think it's hopefully that's sort of going to be the standard from now on, is that, everything being on a platform, you expect things from one era to work with that of the next, so long as it isn't like a crazy upgrade.
I think it's really interesting how uninteresting the new console generation is, if you get what I mean. I don't mean that as like a a kind of negative point against them, but like you say, there isn't that sort of like everything's new, everything is noticeably different moment with these new consoles. And it really is interesting, like you say, that the controllers are backwards compatible and the interface stays the same. And I was thinking about how like previous console generations they always had that hard cut between them, whether that was in terms of like the console's UI, or like you say, the controllers needing to get new controllers every time. But it was even the games. I remember I even remember back when the Xbox One came out, and I think this was the Xbox One, that they released like the Assassin's Creed kind of had, I think Assassin's Creed Black Flag was on both systems, but then they did kind of an Xbox 360 version of Assassin's Creed, which was like Assassin's Creed Rogue. And then they did like a proper just Xbox One version, which was Assassin's Creed Unity. I think it was something like that. And it's interesting that that's not happened this time. Like it's difficult now to find the games which are next-gen games, right? It's even like stuff like in this case again, the new Assassin's Creed Valhalla. That isn't like a next-gen game, right? It's a game that you can run on your old Xbox if you want, but you can also run it on your new Xbox, and the performance is better if you've got the new one. And kind of to your point before, that's even more like a PC than it's ever been, right? The idea that like the games work across all of these platforms, but if you've got the more expensive version, then it runs better on yours. And I find that really interesting, the way that, like you say, they're not necessarily saying you've got to have the Xbox Series X. Like in Microsoft's case, really, they're probably just saying you've got to have Game Pass. And we don't care whether you've got an Xbox One, an Xbox Series X, or even a PC in that case. Like whatever you've got, like this is the Microsoft platform, and just play it wherever you can.
And I guess like I can really only praise that sort of decision because, at the top level, yes, that is a corporate business decision. But for me, that's not an anti-consumer one. That's, to me, very pro-consumer, because they're getting what they want. They're still selling units of both Xboxes with the Game Pass, which is, essentially like Netflix for games. And the consumers are getting, like, as far as I'm concerned, a pretty good deal with it all.
Yeah, I think so. Like I guess to play devil's advocate a little bit, I think, I think overwhelmingly, I totally agree that it is like a decision that benefits consumers. I do think that with Game Pass, there is sort of, the fact that, not everything's there. Like, only the developers they have the agreements with have got stuff on Game Pass. I think there are elements of that which are kind of anti-consumer, like if you make Game Pass such good value that everyone has to get it, then everyone gets it and it becomes a situation of like, oh, do I really want to like buy this other game because I can just get Game Pass instead? And, I can kind of see a situation there where it becomes like Game Pass becomes a must-have, but you don't buy games that aren't on there. And so people who aren't part of that are missing out. And it kind of gives someone like Microsoft or Sony, if they have their equivalent, it gives them a little bit too much kind of sway there, if you know what I mean. Like, if you kind of have to be on Game Pass to get people to play your game. I don't know. There's some things about that which concern me. Yeah, and I don't know. We're probably still seeing that play out at the moment. At the moment, they're making it such good value that because they just want everyone to pick it up, right? They're in the phase still of just getting people to sign up to it as much as possible. I think long term, I have some questions about how that will play out and whether that will be, whether there'll be some issues with that in terms of like the games that miss out on being on Game Pass. I can see the kind of like the response from people being annoyed that, Game X is not on Game Pass, but I can imagine behind the scenes that can get to the point where Microsoft can offer someone a pretty crappy deal to be on Game Pass, but the developers have to take it, right? Because you've got to be on Game Pass. And I that kind of stuff I do find a bit worrying.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like you said, it remains to be seen. And I guess for the game industry as a whole, those sorts of services could, make or break the kind of games or the quality of the games that developers make as well.
Yeah, that's true. The other thing you said there that I thought was interesting was you were talking about how you guys don't have the 4K TV, so you kind of haven't noticed those things. And I thought it was interesting, and we haven't talked about this before, off this episode, that for me it was the 2K monitor with the PC that was the big deal. It's interesting that kind of that resolution jump is a really big deal, like both for consoles and PCs, in a way that I guess just really wasn't apparent to me when I didn't have something that was at least 2K. So that's kind of interesting there as well, that's such an important part of it.
Yeah. But I guess like what I was sort of more saying with that is not necessarily that obviously like 4K looks better because it's crisper, but necessarily like that we're not seeing a jump in the graphics from an Xbox One version of a game to Xbox Series X in the actual graphics in terms of like, do the shadows look better? What's the reflection quality like? Like that is all pretty much still the same as what it was on Xbox One.
Right.
So we don't see that change. But if we were going up to a 4K TV requires extra performance to run those same graphics.
Sure.
And because we're not running at a high resolution, we're not seeing the benefit of like the extra power of the Xbox. Is more what I was sort of saying. But that being said, yes, like, it's a great time to have a better resolution TV because we've now got these consoles that can actually run the games on that size.
Right. Does it make you want to get a better TV? Like, I know you're not a big console player anyway, as it is, but does it kind of give you the desire to kind of do a TV upgrade as well?
Yeah, I think so. Honestly, the thing that really makes me want it more is in like the user interfaces for games. It's actually on 1080p with some games. It's actually really hard to read the writing because it hasn't really been made in such a way that it's very crisp for lower res TVs. So I think that's where I would see the biggest benefit from the 4K TV. But obviously, the edges of everything are a lot crisper, and I just want a new TV because I want to have a smart TV that I can stream stuff to as well. So it's another big benefit of that.
Yeah.
That's another thing. TVs are sort of turning into PCs a little bit now as well. So, but maybe that's for another discussion or another podcast when we become tech heads and we talk about audio visual stuff.
That is true. But hey, before we were talking about how, like, you know, the kind of the cut between generations is not what it was, and you know, you don't kind of have like old gen and current gen games in the way you do anymore. They sort of seem to cross over in between. And we haven't talked about any actual games yet, but I wanted to sort of start that off by talking about a game that anyone who listens to this podcast will know that we were all looking forward to a lot, which is Cyberpunk 2077. And that is a game that, you know, if you're following the news at all, you've been hearing about some of the discussion around this game. And this is another one of those ones that kind of straddles the generations in that weird way that all these games do at the moment, right? You know, it's on like Xbox One and PS4, it's on all the next gen consoles, it's on PC and all that kind of stuff. And I picked this game up. I picked it up quite a while ago because I knew it was one that I wanted to play. And I've been getting into that a little bit. I haven't put a lot of time into this one, even though I've had it since the day it came out. And again, anyone who's been sort of following the story around this game probably can guess why that is. So I thought even though that's kind of something that we sort of have to talk about at some point, I thought I'd start off with like the positives for this game, because, you know, there's been a lot of negative chat around it. And so I probably played like 5 or 6 hours of Cyberpunk 2077, and I would say that at the moment, just like The Witcher 3, the world building is really good in this game. So this is, you know, the whole thing is mostly set in Night City, which is like this huge, giant, futuristic cyberpunk city that they've created for this game. And in terms of how they have built that city, anyone who's listened to other episodes would know that like cities in games is a thing that I have a real passion for, and I really like a good city in a game. And so far, Night City has done a pretty good job of that. It feels kind of like lived in, it feels alive and quite dense. And probably the biggest thing for me is it feels properly big. So I do find that games in cities, even if the world that they're part of seems like to scale and large, I always find that cities just feel way, way too small. You know, you can always run across the biggest city in Skyrim in like 30 seconds. And that never quite feels right. Whereas because they've sort of made Night City the majority of the map in Cyberpunk, it feels properly big, which is cool. And it feels sort of like nicely cluttered as well. So it's not sort of like a sterile, clean place everywhere. It's sort of, there's a lot of trash, there's a lot of junk and stuff like that. And yeah, I kind of like that. It feels like it's not just sort of a static world that's sort of just waiting for the player to do something. It feels like things are happening outside of what you're doing. I'm sure as I play more, I'll start to kind of, you know, see the Matrix a bit, and that sort of effect will wear off. But so far, I think that the kind of world that you're in and the world building they're doing is really cool.
So would you say it in its current form, it's like, you know, feels pretty emergent in terms of things happening and you actually feeling like you're part of a lived-in world?
It does at the moment, yeah. I would say right now it does. Like in the sense of just sort of playing through sort of the opening acts of the game and just kind of walking around the city looking at stuff. It does feel very immersive. It feels like you're sort of, it feels like you're part of a bigger world rather than the whole world existing just to serve you, which I think is really cool. Like I think that is an issue I have with some open world games, is that you never feel properly small in the world. You always feel like the only reason the world even exists is for you to sort of poke at it. So yeah, this is feeling good so far.
So is that to say that that's where the positives end? What else is really bringing you back to continue playing the game at the moment? Obviously, other than you don't sound like you've finished it, but
well, I would say that at the moment, nothing is bringing me back to playing it, which we'll get to in a second. But in terms of the positives, one of the other things I really liked was that all of the characters I encountered in the first, like, sort of, like I said, like 4, 5, 6 hours of the game, they are all really instantly appealing and interesting, which I really liked. Like, none of them immediately seem to be the kind of stereotypes that you get in storytelling, if you know what I mean. Like, there's even a certain character early on who is like, he's like a huge, large, like muscly guy, and he's like covered in tattoos, and he's got like a mohawk or something like that, and he looks like exactly the character who you would expect to just be like generic tough guy in whatever sort of fictional story he's part of. But as soon as you have anything to do with this character, you realize that's not the case, and he has a much more interesting personality and much more interesting motivations. And that's been one of the really positive things, that every character I've encountered immediately seems nuanced and multi-layered. They don't seem like they've just got a bunch of sort of tropey characters and thrown them throughout the story. So that's a really positive thing, and I think that bodes well for like the game's writing and the story in general, even though I'm not super deep into it, that I'm looking forward to properly playing through the story, because I think it seems like there's a lot of potential there, and like they've done the work to flesh those characters out.
Right. So, I mean, I don't want to jump into the Witcher 3 Cyberpunk comparison wholeheartedly, but one thing that really, really interests me about anything CD Projekt Red do is they seem to have a pretty good take on like relationships and, I guess, to like a larger extent, like the political systems, and they sort of have always incorporated that well into the Witcher games. Is there what's that like? Is there anything that sort of rings true in Cyberpunk 2077 with that same sort of I guess like string that they do with the Witcher games?
In terms of the political stuff, I'd have to say I'm not far enough in to be able to like give my take on that. Like, there are sort of threads there. A lot of them are more related to maybe like crime rather than politics, which I think is still really interesting. You know, I think it looks like it's telling a very different story. Like, it looks like Cyberpunk to me is a crime drama, really, rather than something else, which is really cool. But I wouldn't say I'm far enough in to be able to say anything about that. But in terms of characters, yeah, I think like there are parallels there to The Witcher, where I really care about the characters I'm meeting as soon as I meet them, which, you know, I can't say that about most games I play, to be honest. I think like video games have a real bad habit of having like very, very generic stereotypical characters, and it doesn't feel like that so far. So, you know, I'm keen to get into that more. But that's probably the extent of the positives that I'm sort of comfortable talking about at this point, because I have stopped playing this game because the performance and the bugs are so bad. They're so bad for me. Like, the worst of them is that I have had a regularly reoccurring bug where when I reload my save game, the game instantly hard crashes to the desktop, and it does it every single time I reload the save. And at that point, I just have to reload an earlier save, which sometimes also just hard crashes to the desktop again, to the point where at one point, I think I had one save out of like my 6 or 7 saves that would even load without instantly crashing. And so at that point, like, I know this is a meme, but at some point the game really was quite literally unplayable for me because of that save game bug. And so, you know, in terms of that kind of stuff, I don't think the game's in a particularly good state. I've had lots and lots of performance issues on my on my old PC, which, like I said, was quite old, but was still able to run a lot of new games on sort of, you know, low or medium settings. The game ran horrendously bad, and was just, not just in terms of poor performance, like low frame rate and things like that, but just constant glitches. So I had audio glitches just constantly throughout the time I was playing. There would be audio glitches with people's dialogue not coming in at the right point, or just sort of random game sounds being way too loud and just drowning out everything else. And that kind of stuff was so ubiquitous across the game that I just felt like I have to put this down until it's actually ready to play.
I think a lot of people, and rightly so, I guess, were like, they felt pretty cut by the release of 2077 because it was delayed so many times, and a lot of people were like, "Oh, it's CD Projekt Red. They're just taking care. They're taking care of their IP.
Yeah.
In much the same that a company like Blizzard does, where it's like, well, we're not going to release something that we know we're not happy with." But I think, yeah, that's what really cut a lot of people pretty deep, because it was getting pushed off and pushed off. And I guess for a lot of people that meant, well, it's just, they're crossing the T's and dotting the I's.
Yeah.
And then it released in the state it's in. And I guess that, I guess a lot of the anger that I've seen thrown towards the game online seems to be fairly warranted, considering the fact it was delayed so much as well.
Yeah, like I don't think I've ever played a game that is this bad at launch. I think maybe No Man's Sky is comparable, but No Man's Sky was different, right? It was like there was just it wasn't a great experience at launch, but it was just that a lot of content was missing. It was a different kind of thing. Whereas here, it feels like the game is there, but it's just not ready. Like, they haven't finished making it.
Yeah.
And there's
held together with clag glue.
yeah, and there's a lot of really little things in it which are kind of annoying, just like little things that don't even seem like bugs. They just seem like systems that aren't finished, or if they are finished, it's very strange. And like, I don't kind of want to go into a huge list of these, but the one that I would talk about is that the game has kind of like a sort of wanted system, a bit like the GTA games. So if you commit crimes or sort of kill civilians and things like that, then there are police in Night City and they'll come after you. But what basically happens is if you, say, shoot a random civilian on the street, the police just instantly spawn behind you, like 2 meters away from you. So, the GTA system, as people will know, you get your wanted stars. And when you get your wanted stars, you might see on your map that the police are coming to your location. And, you can kind of get out of their sort of like line of sight and try and like get rid of your wanted stars. In this, as soon as you commit a crime, the police are just instantly spawned into the world on top of you. And it's such a terrible, terrible system. Like, the game it's not like GTA in that it's kind of made for you to have rampages of crime around the city. But the fact that they've put in a crime system and it is so poorly implemented is just kind of baffling. Like, I don't know how they thought that would be an appealing way to represent like law enforcement and crime in the game, to just basically, it's just instantly spawning them in on top of you anytime you do something wrong. So yeah, there's a few things like that which just seem like they're not even bugs. They're just like very, very poor design decisions.
Yeah, I actually did watch, and I probably shouldn't watch videos like this having not played it, but it sounds like the game's got a ways to go before I'm probably comfortable playing it. But I did watch a comparison video, basically side by side between Cyberpunk and GTA 5. And so at first, when I saw the thumbnail for the video, I was like, why would you compare those two games? They're like completely different games. But then when you actually really think about it and watch through watching the video, I was like, well, I guess these actually are fairly comparable, because they're made up of a lot of similar themes, similar systems, sort of like what you were saying. This one more specifically was comparing things like what happens when you do a certain thing that both games have. So one of them was like, what happens when you run into a Stoby pole with a car, or hit like destructible objects, what happens to them in the world. But it also did have stuff like the police system, and a few other things that are representations of something occurring. And I was actually kind of really, really blown away by the lack of, I guess you could call it polish, with the Cyberpunk comparison, because it was just sort of like, well, how did they release this game knowing a game like GTA and some other games as well have the same sort of systems but just done so much better. Like what were they thinking, kind of thing? And that, I
Right.
guess that's sort of like the takeaway from it is like, were they thinking about that, or is this just something that they completely gapped? So yeah, I mean, I guess it's a bit disheartening to hear that, you know, you yourself sort of can back up a lot of those sorts of claims to you know, lackluster representations in the game.
Yeah, and you know, it's very disappointing. Like anyone who listens to the pod knows how excited all three of us were for this game, considering how much we loved Witcher 3. But like, look, the last thing I'll probably say is that I've put probably a couple of hours into it on my new PC, and I kind of just restarted on that to see how it would go, and I can pretty much put everything on like max settings on the new PC, and I still see the graphical glitches and stuff like that, but the game runs much better and it looks better. But the thing I will say as well is that even on this brand new PC with everything like cranked up, the game looks good, but it doesn't look like amazing. It doesn't look amazing in the way that Witcher 3 looked amazing compared to other games when it came out. And I have to be honest, like I know that CD Projekt Red have said there's a next gen version of this game coming for Xbox Series X and PS5 at some point this year. I do have to wonder whether that version will also mean that the PC version gets a significant upgrade. You know what I mean? Like I do wonder whether the version that we all have right now is a bit of an in-between version of the game that, you know, it runs okay on good PCs and new consoles. It seemingly, from what everyone is saying, it doesn't run at all well on like launch old gen consoles, but that it's sort of a version that is made to run on everything, if you know what I mean, and that we don't even really have the proper version of Cyberpunk yet, because there's just a lot of stuff. Like I have all the textures at like, you know, max or ultra, but when you get up close to a lot of things, the textures don't look very high res, and like there's a lot of like character models that for sort of like individual people on the streets that look like way behind games that have been out for years now. And I don't know, I do just wonder whether like the next gen version of this game is going to be like really quite a significant upgrade, that it's not just going to be, you know, a couple of like textures and lighting effects, that's going to be the game. And I don't know, at this point I feel like maybe I'm just going to wait for that to play it, because there just seems like there is so much that needs work.
Yeah, and look, and that's something that I know Witcher 3 had a few hiccups as well. You know, the version that a lot of people have played and no one remember is the version that is the fruits of the labor of a lot of patches, a lot of fixing up. You know, it's definitely not what was represented when it very first came out, but this seems like it's a little bit, yeah, there's a lot missing from the expectations that people were told they were going to have. Um, and you know, that being said, I'm quite happy to continue the tradition of waiting to get these games when the game of the year edition, which, or the, you know, like the humble bundle gold edition or something in like a year or 2 years time, um, and enjoy it then when I know it's sort of, you know, it's going to be where it's meant to be at.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair call. Like I said, I think I might just be waiting for this one. You know, like keeping an eye on keep an eye on what's coming out of the development studio in terms of, you know, what patches they're doing and what they're fixing. And yeah, I think maybe I'll just wait on this one. Like, look, you know, we talked before about No Man's Sky. Like, I think that looks like a really interesting game now. Now that has got a couple of years of development and it's got all the content that people expected it to have. So, you know, I'm happy to kind of play No Man's Sky now and like really get into it if it's good. So, you know, I'm not going to hold it against Cyberpunk in 6 months. If it's good in 6 months, you know, I'm not gonna boycott it because it was bad when it launched or something like that. But, you know, I think like it would be dishonest now to sort of not be talking about the problems with this game, because, you know, because there's a lot of them. But yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at with that one. So yeah, maybe it's something we'll be coming back to in future months on the pod.
Hopefully, we'll see where it's at then. And yeah, look, if it starts blowing people away, then yeah, maybe we can revisit it then.
We'll be there. We'll still be first in line to to have Cyberpunk become as much of a cliche on this podcast as The Witcher has.
Yes, we'll remain CD Projekt Red fanboys till the end of our days.
To the death.
So I hope all our listeners love a bit of heavy or death metal, because I have been playing the new Doom expansion or DLC, The Ancient Gods Part 1, which I picked up on Steam for full price. Another game that I decided to splurge on because I needed that fix. I was getting the Doom itch because Eternal really left a bit of an impression on me, I think. So yeah, that is what I have been getting into, and I got to say that I've really been enjoying it. It's a perfect sort of add-on to where Eternal left off, and yeah, it's much the same in terms of gameplay, but obviously it really, really builds on the lore of the storyline, and sort of throws you into different areas of hell and other areas as well. So really, really loving it so far.
So is this sorry, I realize I know nothing about this. Like, this is kind of like a story-based expansion, like a single-player thing?
Yes, this is a single player expansion, though it does add some other stuff to the multiplayer component of Doom Eternal. But I guess you would call it an expansion. Obviously, you get it in the DLC section on Steam, or your Xbox or PS5. However, the thing that makes me think of it more of an expansion is, one, it's marketed as such, but also in the game when you go into it, it's not just a different area or anything. It's actually like a completely separate part of the game. So it's like a new save system. You've got like old Doom Eternal saves, and then you've got the Ancient Gods Part 1. And then when Part 2 comes out, I assume it'll be sort of the same sort of deal. But yeah, to answer your question, really just follows on with the storyline. And that's really where it ends in terms of the new stuff that I've seen so far, outside of the levels. Aren't like, you don't really have a break in the levels. You've very much really, really, really long levels to play through, whereas like the Doom Eternal and even Doom 2016 had very sort of sporadic short periods of playtime, and then you'd either get sent back to your like home base, whatever that is at the time, and then you'll go into a new area, which was significantly smaller than the ones in the Ancient Gods. And I'm kind of glad that that's the case, because it's like $30. It's definitely not like a little DLC thing. So I feel like I've passed. I think I'm about halfway through, and I feel like I've already got my money's worth, I think, in terms of just how long the game is.
This is kind of an aside, but do you reckon that they're aware of the fact that by calling it an expansion, kind of more specifically rather than DLC, they're triggering something in the brains of gamers of like yours and my generation, saying it's an expansion, and we're kind of like, oh, that's the one we remember.
I feel like that could be the case, because now that I think of it, you don't really see the word expansion come around that all that often. Like you see, I guess sometimes you see like standalone expansion, which to me is a bit different. Like an expansion is something that you need the base game for, and I think actually do need the base game to play the Ancient Gods. So to me, I think it could be a bit of a throwback, or like I think they know their market.
Yeah,
it's like, it's the reason why I don't think there's any like Doom Battle Royale mode or anything like that. I think they very much know that their market is like, people, Twitch shooters, arena shooters. So yeah, it could be the case, I think. The first thing I noticed though with this new expansion though is it is really, really difficult. It is like Eternal was kind of handholdy. It was challenging at times, and I play on the easiest difficulty, just because I want to experience the game as it was sort of written, and I already knew that it was sort of challenge going into it. But yeah, the difference between both games is it's crazy. Like I'm constantly like almost dying, and really having to use those movement abilities that I explained Doom Eternal is like sort of well known for as it came out. You really have to stay mobile to stay alive in this, and use your abilities to make sure you're getting health from enemies or getting armor and ammo from enemies with the abilities that you've chosen. So yeah, I really wasn't expecting it, to be honest, to be that difficult. And God forbid I ever pump the difficulty up past what it is now. I don't understand how some people would be able to play this game on like the nightmare or ultra nightmare modes, because it is just insane.
That seems crazy that even on the easiest difficulty, it's that challenging. Like we kind of, I feel like we just talked about how, calling it an expansion is a bit of a throwback. And when we talked about this game previously, we've talked about how, these Doom remakes are a throwback to 1 and 2, more specifically. It feels like games being hard on easy is a throwback as well.
Yeah, like your Dark Souls stuff and all your games like that.
Yeah, it's so unusual now it's so unusual for games to have to be hard on every difficulty. Usually there is always a version of the game that is like very, very easy to play for anyone in terms of accessibility.
Yeah. And it's not even like you can play the game at a slower pace in order to alleviate or mitigate how hard it is, because like I mentioned, I think last time I was talking when I the Doom Eternal episode, I mentioned that there are these sort of breaks in the gameplay called they're called arenas, and it's basically a point in the game where everything behind you is blocked off, everything going forward is blocked off, and then you're in this area where you're just thrown monsters and everything is just like hectic until you get past that bit. And those are pretty frequent in the game, and it's a good way to sort of practice those abilities I was talking about. But in this game you really, really feel it. In Eternal they were sort of still relatively easy. Some of the later ones were a little bit difficult, but this one is like, when it happens you're like, oh shit, am I ready for this right now? So I mean, look, I'm all for it, to be honest. I like that I'm getting challenged, and it's not frustrating because there is still a live system. So if you go out exploring and getting your extra lives, then you can use them for when you die, and then come back, like straight into the battle where you've left off. And so, very grateful that they've kept that system in there, because I am actually having to use it now.
That's the line, really, isn't it? It's like the difficulty, frustrating kind of boundary can be really fine, but if you get that right, then it really does work to have a game that is challenging, but it doesn't annoy you with the challenge. And like you say, a big part of that there's so many games where the annoying part is almost just the loading screen afterwards, so having that system, like you say, that can take you back in so quickly, I think that can make a huge difference. You make a game that needs to be almost like, I don't know if it's trial and error, but it needs to be attempted multiple times. You've got to let people get back into that quickly for it to be appealing.
Yeah, that's right. And I think they've actually really struck a really, really nice balance of making it difficult and then having these things that can alleviate that frustration from the difficulty, without making it, overly easy. And I guess another one is, again, this is present in Doom Eternal, but your abilities and the RPG aspect of it, I guess, to an extent, is where you can swap and change different things that your character has. And so if you go into a an arena where you're getting absolutely slaughtered by a certain kind of enemy, then you can then mid fight change those abilities to adapt to those sorts of enemies or that situation a bit better. And so I think that's a really cool thing that they've allowed you to do, because it can get very, very overwhelming very easily. So the ability to make those like split second changes to your character's abilities come in real handy. And they've actually added in it's like a new layer of abilities as well. I'm just trying to think of what they're called. I think they're called runes. I'm just trying to, I can't remember now. Basically, it's like another section of special things that you can do.
It's like another like level of customization or something.
Yeah, kind of. I guess it's like, at the base level, you've got like the stuff that you unlock, like your predator suit unlocks, which have like 15% more health, all that like your base sort of like things that help you throughout the games. And then there's other ones that another suit slot where you can do things like make an enemy stay staggered for longer so that you can do a glory kill on it, because a lot of abilities that you have require you to get like build up a certain amount of glory kills. So there's like those sorts of little ability changes and perks, I guess you could call them, that were already in the game, but then there's a new level of those that you can also add other stuff into that are more focused around what happens when you're like close to dying. So it's like when you're 20% health or less, you pick up more armor, or your bullets do more damage and stuff. So they've added a few more little things like that into the game, I guess, so that way it doesn't make all the game isn't like completely the same as what the Eternal stuff is. And
Sure.
That being said, like I'm about halfway through. There might be some new stuff as well towards the end. Bit disappointed that I've noticed that there aren't any new enemies as such. Like I know there's a couple new bosses that are just sort of solely in there for the storyline, but I actually haven't noticed any new enemies yet, which is a little bit disappointing, because that's one of the things that I really love about the Doom game is like the different mobs that you encounter and the different stuff that they can do. So yeah, a little bit disappointing there.
I can get that. Like with all those systems that you're just talking about then, and those different kind of ways you can kind of chop and change to approach fights, it does seem like, the obvious sort of sandbox thing to add in there are different types of enemies, right? If you have that kind of customization element to your skills, then the thing you want to have to switch them up for are new and interesting enemies that force you to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess like weapons as well. That's another thing, that there are no new weapons. In fact, when you go into Doom Eternal, whatever you had on your character, Ancient Gods, whatever you had with Doom Eternal is just like already gone over, including like how much ammo you had for each gun, what guns you had unlocked, and all their abilities and modifications. That all just transfers straight into this, which I guess is like a continuity thing. But yeah, there's definitely not a lot of new content outside of levels. One of the focuses they do have, though, is Doom has this kind of battle pass system, I guess you could call it. I think I explained that in the pod for Doom Eternal as well. But it's like you don't pay for it, but you receive experience as you play the game, either in multiplayer or online multiplayer mode, and you complete challenges, and that unlocks different skins for like your player, or the weapons, or your menu. You can have a different podium or background that your guy's standing in front of. There's a lot of that, and that's also a very seasonal thing. Like I think there was one when I first played Eternal, it was basically Halloween, so there's a lot of Halloween themed stuff. When I started playing Ancient Gods, it was Christmas time, and I think it still is at the moment. So there's a lot of new content like that they've added in as part of the game. Also, a lot of different skins as part of like the challenges outside of the Battle Pass thing. that you unlock as you do certain things or discover certain things throughout the game as well. So there's content in that way, but definitely there's no new real gameplay changing content, which to me I find kind of disappointing. But at the same time, look, the game's gameplay was never a bad thing in Eternal. So, I'm quite happy to continue playing it through the lore because it is still very enjoyable.
In terms of that story stuff, is it like, did Doom Eternal have an ending which kind of wrapped up on its own? In the sense that, is this something that, you kind of have to play this expansion to get the full story? Or is this, is it sort of a more of a spin-off thing?
No, it's definitely a continuation. So a lot of the Doom Eternal is alluding to something called the Father, which I assume is a kind of like a god that reigns over heaven and hell. In
Okay.
this game, but you'll never actually really encounter that being. You don't really know too much about it outside of the fact that it is all powerful. However, the ancient gods is now starting to push you in that direction, as well as introducing you to some of the other lore items that are mentioned in Doom Eternal that are mentioned as being important, but you never really encounter or have to do much with them in the storyline. So I guess it's a spin-off in some regards, but it's very much going like the next level up from what Doom Eternal had. So yeah, I'd call it very much like a sequel to Doom Eternal in terms of the storyline.
Okay, but Doom Eternal itself, that kind of fully wraps up. So it's not like Doom Eternal ends on a cliffhanger or something like that, and you need this DLC to finish the story.
It did in some ways. Like
Okay.
it definitely left it open that there was going to be something more, and I think that was already known to the player because when you could buy Doom Eternal, there was the season pass was already available, and it already told you what those um, expansions were going to be,
Right.
along with a bit of a summary and a synopsis of what they were about. So it was already, I think, set in stone at the end of Doom Eternal that it was going to go somewhere else. But you can still finish Doom Eternal and then be completely happy with the storyline. But I think games being games, they want to sort of build on what's come before, and that's definitely what they're doing here. But in terms of Doom Eternal, like that's where I'm at with it. If I think if there's anything more that comes as a result of finishing it, I'll definitely let the audience know in the coming pods. But that's about it for now. Paul, I understand you've been dabbling with the future, as we call it, or as we knew it back when it was first announced when we were little, which is virtual reality.
I have
Can you
been.
tell us a little bit about what's been happening there?
Yeah, so I have been getting into some VR stuff. Actually, I'm kind of just realizing now that this whole episode has a bit of a hardware theme to it. Like new PC, new console, VR. I didn't even think of that when we were sort of planning out what we're talking about, but this is kind of the first ever Disc and Dice hardware special. We should have organized that better, and we could have like named the episode like that. But hey, I'm just realizing it now.
I don't think we've actually named the episode on SoundCloud or anything yet, so there's always room.
That's true, but it would feel like all the hardware stuff should be kind of up front if we were going to do that. I know
Oh,
what
that's
once
true.
once I know Timmy and I kind of we held all our board game and tabletop stuff so we could do like a big tabletop special and talk about it. I feel like if I'd thought a little bit more about what we were talking about, we could have done something like that here. But hey, doesn't matter now. So so I have been trying out some VR, specifically the Oculus Quest 2. So just to give a bit of background, before this I had tried the Samsung VR, which is basically the headset that you slide your mobile phone into, and it does VR like that. It has no hand controllers or anything like that. And I had very briefly tried out some of the much more high-end VR, but really only in sort of like a tech demo sense. So this was It was sort of the highest end VR that I had had a significant amount of time to try out, and I didn't get this myself. I mentioned earlier that I didn't play some of the games I expected to over the Christmas break and with friends and family, and that was because a family member has this Oculus Quest 2, and on Christmas Day at some point we sort of brought a bunch of board games and we thought we'll sit down and play these because I've got some cousins who are into that stuff as well. And as soon as that Oculus Quest came out, it was very clear that nothing else was getting played because it was so intriguing. And so before I sort of talk about the specific games that I played, I just wanted to say a bit about like the tech, because I was really blown away by how good the Oculus Quest was. Like the clarity of the resolution and the responsiveness of the kind of controllers and stuff really surprised me. Like I know the tech has come a long way, but yeah, I was really impressed with what this was like. So you kind of have your headset and you have your two hand controllers, and I feel like having the only VR that I've tried before having been the Samsung VR where you just have the headset, I feel like having the hand controllers is such a huge step. I think almost like if we're going to talk about it like this, it's like real VR, you've got to have those hand controllers. You know, you've got to be able to sort of use your hands in the world for it to really fulfill its potential. So I thought this was really cool as well in terms of it being quite easy to use. So it doesn't need like a massive, huge space or a lot of cords and stuff. I know some of the higher end ones, you really need quite a big space and you have to set up sensors and things like that. This one, you kind of just put on the headset, you grab the controllers, and it can work wirelessly if the battery's charged, or you just plug it into a power point and you just pick up and go. It's very easy to use like that. I could see that it could be physically uncomfortable when you used it for long periods. It's got a lot of sort of adjustment straps and things like that, but I have felt this before with VR, but I do sort of feel like there's a discomfort factor there which I think would bother me with VR. I don't think like I could sit down and play VR all day the way I could, you know, a PC or a console and things like that. But, you know, more generally speaking, I thought the tech itself was really impressive. And, you know, it is you have that sort of VR moment that I've had before with other VR tech where you sort of put the headset on and you're kind of open mouthed for a little bit because you never really expect it to be quite like it is when you put the headset on, and it really is quite impressive.
Why can't what's really holding back those higher end systems from being as user friendly as this Quest thing? Like why do they need all that stuff when it sounds like you've got as good experience as what those ones have with all the other stuff and the setup and the space? What do you reckon the gap is there in between the two?
I don't know, to be honest, and I'd have to say I haven't played the high end ones anywhere near enough to be able to say what that difference is. You know, I think with a lot of those there is a processing power difference. I think, as far as I know, this one does have like a lot of the hardware it's just in the headset itself. Whereas, so it is built to be standalone in that way. Whereas, I do think a lot of those high end ones they're built to be plugged into a PC and played. And so, you know, the idea of them is that you can get much higher level performance because you're running off a PC. Whereas this one, actually, one of the benefits of this is you can plug it into a PC and use it for things, but it is also built to just kind of have the games loaded up on the headset, which has all the hardware in it, and just run like that. So I think maybe that's the big difference. This is meant to be a more sort of portable, casual headset, whereas those are a bit more hardcore.
Right. Okay. So you weren't playing this on, like, wasn't plugged into a PS4 or an Xbox or anything. This was just like good to go with just the headset. Didn't need like apps or anything, nothing like that.
Well, the headset has like, you know, it has things in it and you download the games through. Well, I don't know exactly how you do all that because like it wasn't my headset, but everything is in the headset itself. So there's no PC, there's no console being plugged into or anything. It's just the headset is the hardware, which is pretty cool.
Tell us a little bit about some of the, like, what were the games you were playing on there? Were they just like, were they just sort of gimmicky games, or did they seem pretty well fleshed out for a standalone VR title?
I would say they still lean towards gimmicky. So the ones I played, there were three main ones I played. They lean towards gimmicky, but I would say they're all really good. So the first one that I played, and the one we played the most of, was called Beat Saber. So it's basically a rhythm game where you are holding what are, to all intents and purposes, two lightsabers in the game, and you need to hit boxes as they go past you in time with the music. And so you think of something like Guitar Hero, but rather than pretending to play a guitar, you're basically like swinging these lightsabers around, smashing boxes in time with music. And this one was really, really cool. So it scales very nicely. So at kind of low difficulty levels, all you got to do is hit the boxes in time. But as you up the difficulty and turn on sort of different features in the game, there are different things like you have to hit the boxes at the right angle. So the boxes kind of come towards you and they have arrows on them. And so if it's like a down arrow, you've got to kind of swipe down through it with your saber. Or if it's a right or left, you've got to swipe across in the right direction and stuff like that. And then it has a bunch of other little things like there are sort of walls that approach you. And so you may have to kind of swipe a couple of boxes and then step to the left to sort of dodge the wall and things like that. And it's a pretty typical VR one where you're basically immersed in like a huge sort of Tron, like, neon retro-y future sort of world. The kind of aesthetic that I'm sort of talking about, I think. It's that kind of aesthetic, and there's a lot of lights and flashing colors going on around you, and then these boxes are coming towards you and you're hitting them in time with the music. And it was actually really, really very fun. And I had a great time with this one. I think everyone else who played it had a really good time with it. It's almost got like a fitness game aspect to it as well on higher difficulties, because you do have to move around quite a bit. So it's almost like a VR Guitar Hero in a sense. The only issue with this one that I could see quite early on is that it has very limited songs. So it has like a bunch of licensed music, and then it has a bunch of kind of music which has been, I believe, has been written just specifically for the game. And all of that stuff actually, it works really well with the game. But you know how Guitar Hero was the kind of game that was supported for years and years and years with just like hundreds and hundreds of songs? I don't think Beat Saber has that kind of licensing push behind it. So it's kind of like, it's a really, really cool game, but once you got sick of the songs, you kind of out of luck.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, but as kind of as an example of like what this VR can do, I thought it was really, really good. I thought it's one that I would absolutely recommend to anyone to give a go. The next thing that I played was a game that I think you would know, JT, which is Superhot.
Yep. It's like a first-person time-bending shooter kind of thing, right?
Yeah. It's like a first-person shooter where you're stationary and time only moves when you move. And this was really cool in VR, as I think you can probably imagine. So you have your two hand controllers, and they're basically your hands in the game. And so you have to like reach down and pick up a gun, or you can reach up your hand and sort of punch a guy who's coming towards you. And as I said before, time only moves when you move. So it's quite cool. If you're playing it on a PC, you can just kind of, you take your hands off the mouse and keyboard and time has stopped, basically. But it's really interesting in VR because for time to stop, you physically have to stop moving your whole body, or you have to stop moving, your arms and head. So that is it's actually better, I think, in VR, because it's kind of like, it's more of a physical effort to stop and assess the situation, if you know what I mean. You can, on PC, you just take your hands off the controller, you can do whatever you want, nothing's going to happen. But in this one, you sort of actually have to physically stop and kind of like look around carefully with your eyes. And, if you want to reach down and pick up a gun, like that's a physical movement and time is going to move again. That one, like, I felt that was really fun and really cool. I did feel in the same way, and I felt this about Superhot when I played it on PC, that game is kind of like, it's very cool, but it's sort of one step above a tech demo in a way, if you know what I mean. Like, I don't know if there's a full game in Superhot. It's more like a cool feature that's just expanded out over a few levels. But yeah, that one was interesting as well. The last one that we played quite a bit of was something that's not really even a game. It's just basically a VR three-dimensional painting simulator. And it just basically sits you down in a three-dimensional space and you can just paint in the air. And it has like a bunch of different sort of paint tools and things like that, and effects, and obviously different colors and stuff. And this one I actually thought was really quite cool. So it's very like open and abstract. It's the least gamey of everything that we played, and it's more like just sort of a relaxing activity. But you can just sort of sit in this virtual space and you can just draw things. And then of course, because it's all virtual, you can get up and move around. So you could draw like a person or something, and then you could move around that person and, you know, add touches to it as you go and things like that. And I thought this was pretty cool. I think for sort of really creative types, it would be a really good sort of chill out game, you know, to just kind of disappear into a virtual space and paint and draw and things like that. But even like for me, who is not a particularly good drawer or into anything like that, I did find it really fun to just sort of play with all the features there. And like, you can sort of, I was trying to just sort of completely enclose myself in drawing and things like that. And that was kind of fun. So that one was really cool as well. I think maybe like someone like you, JT, would probably appreciate that one a lot more than I did.
Yeah, I think I've seen that one before and it looked really cool. I think some people have even managed to draw stuff in that program or something like it and then export it as like a 3D model to print or put in like a 3D program
Right.
for
Okay.
3D printing, which I think is really, really cool. I think that's like, that to me is a very, it's something I would never have guessed you would be able to do before VR was a thing. I would never have thought that that was a possibility, that people could paint something in a 3D space with a headset, you know, one to one, like with their hand,
Yep.
and then be able to like make that a real thing as well. So it's like one of those, you know, VR is still in its infancy, I think, in a lot of ways, but it's really cool to hear that that sort of thing is possible.
Yeah, that stuff was really cool, and I've seen some stuff online since then that I've looked up of like very artistically inclined people drawing, like creating like really incredible things in that program, like, you know, drawing like an entire tree that has like leaves overhead, and, you know, you can basically sit on the ground under a huge glowing tree and stuff like that, which is really, really cool. But yeah, it's sort of a cool little tech demo-y type thing in a way as well. But I thought it was quite fun. One of the really cool additions though to this, which I thought was great, is that we were playing with this VR headset, but if you have a Chromecast on your TV, you can Chromecast what the person is seeing to the TV. And I thought this was such a cool addition because it turned VR into basically a party game at that point, because even if someone else has the headset on and they're, you know, painting something, everyone else can sit around and watch the TV and see what they're doing. Or if they're playing like Beat Saber or Superhot or something, again, someone is playing, but everyone else can watch it on the screen and can kind of, you know, get into it along with them and see how well they're doing and kind of react to the stuff that happens to them. And I thought that was like a really, really interesting twist there, that even though one person is playing, it became a whole group experience to be playing this VR. And I don't know, I guess I never quite thought of VR as being a party game in the same way that, like, you know, a card game or something like that might be. But in this instance, it really felt like it filled sort of the same kind of mold as that. I think the other thing as well, which had me really interested in this Oculus Quest 2, is, as I said earlier, the fact that it can also be plugged into a PC and used with sort of, you know, what you might say are like proper games in that sense. So stuff like Star Wars Squadrons or Half-Life Alyx, it works with all of those. And the family member who had brought this along had actually said he was playing through Half-Life Alyx at the moment on the Oculus Quest 2. So I've got to say, like, I had such a good time with this, and it was so fun as a party game that I felt like, you could kind of pull out and have a go with every time you had friends around for a bit of entertainment. And the fact that it also transfers over into those more sort of hardcore games, like something like Star Wars Squadrons, I would be very interested in using a VR headset for that. That I felt like this was the first time I've played VR and come away feeling like I think I could justify that purchase, because this Oculus Quest 2, it goes for around $400. So that really high-end VR stuff, as far as I know, that they're pushing like the $1,000 mark for those really high-end headsets. And $400 is probably still a little bit more than I would spend on this one, but I felt like with how flexible it was, the different things I could use it with, and how accessible it was for a lot of people to enjoy, it's the first time I'd thought like I would probably buy one of these. So that was a big step for me. Like I've never really felt that way about VR.
Yeah, it seems really cool, I think. And I think, you know, the being able to see what other people on the screen are doing is like kind of essential.
Yeah.
Especially, obviously if you're on your own, it's not an issue. But like you said, like you could do the painting game, and that could be like 3D Pictionary for people to watch, like that. That I'm sure there's like anything with a bit of a sandbox element in that regard you could probably have a lot of fun with.
Yeah, and it like the other ones like Super Hot and Beat Saber, they almost worked like a kind of like pass the controller multiplayer thing. Like in a game where you might like you hand the controller around and everyone kind of has a go at a level and tries to beat it. It kind of works the same way. You put the headset on, you have a go at this level in Super Hot, but everyone else who is there gets to see how you're doing and sort of enjoy it along with you, which was really cool. So yeah, that's basically my latest incursion into the territory of VR. Pretty impressed. Had a really good time with that. Like I said, I think if that went on a really good sale, or if there was, say, a next generation of it where they got the cost down a little bit more, I feel like I could see myself investing in one of those, and I feel like I could get value for money out of that, knowing that I can use it with PC stuff as well. So, I'm not rushing out to buy one tomorrow, but it's much more on my radar now that I've spent some time with the Oculus Quest 2. But
yeah, I think it's going to get really, really interesting over the next, couple years as well. Now, especially now that we've got this next gen of consoles that might be able to do VR even better. So I'm really, really excited to see where it all goes as well.
Right, yeah. Just like to clarify there, if anyone is wondering, this is not compatible with Xbox or PlayStation. So at the moment, that stuff, as far as I know, is it's very kind of locked away in its own ecosystems. So I think there's like a PSVR, and like that's the one you can use with PlayStation and stuff like that. So
right, okay.
Yeah, it's almost like when we're talking before about how the Series X is all about sort of backwards compatibility and the platform. It feels like the VR space isn't quite there yet. They're still playing the exclusive game with that. That's about all that we have been playing for this episode, but I feel like we already got a sense kind of earlier on that both of us have a lot of stuff that we're looking forward to playing over the next few weeks, I reckon. So JT, what have you got planned before our next episode?
So I've made a few purchases on Steam since Christmas that I'm really, really excited to get into. One of them is Star Wars Squadrons, which you very easily talked me into getting into. So I picked it up. It was on special as well, I think, because of the summer sale.
Nice.
So I reckon I will be getting into that at least in the next couple of weeks. Outside of that, there's actually a game I've had my eye on for a very, very long time called Automation. And it is a car company tycoon game where you can create cars for a fictional company that you make up from the ground up. So you start with the engine, you design the engine from scratch, you fiddle around with it to make sure it's all good, and then you make a production, like start producing your cars, and you actually it's not just like picking pre-picked parts. It's actually got almost a little like a rudimentary CAD program in it where you actually design the cars.
This sounds like, is this like the more hardcore version of that car mechanic simulator, like a whole nother level up?
Yes, I'd say so, because it's pretty involved, but it's also stripped back enough that it's quite easy to it's got a lot of workflows involved with it that sort of show you how to do everything. But yeah, I've seen some people playing this online, and I thought it looked really, really cool. Especially since it actually is compatible with another car game, a physics simulator game called BeamNG, where you can actually export the cars that you make in this game, because there's no driving component in this game. It's solely just making them, testing them, and designing them, and then selling them, and then doing the business side of stuff. You can actually export the models and the properties of the cars into this BeamNG drive game, where you can actually drive them around then. So I'm really, really looking forward to seeing how that works, and also getting into that game, because I've been looking into get it for like probably almost 2 years now. So yes, I'm very, very eager to try it.
That definitely sounds like the kind of sim game that you would love. That sounds very JT.
Yeah, it's got that sandbox element to it that I really, 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 really love. So really looking forward to it. And what about yourself? What will you be getting into the coming weeks?
Well, you mentioned Squadrons, and I'm also going to be giving Squadrons a go. It's actually one of the games I haven't tried yet on the new PC. So I'm definitely going to give that a go. We might even try and get a bit of multiplayer going there. That could be fun.
Yes.
But besides that, like I mentioned before, I think I'm going to try and get into No Man's Sky. I'm going to kind of see what that one's about now that I can actually play it. And I might dabble in a few other things now that I have the new hardware here. So I might give Total War a go. That's always been a game that's like really, really like processor intensive, and I'm able to kind of crank those settings up now as well. So I might enjoy a bit of that. And I think I will also try and play some of these board games that I've been wanting to play, particularly the We're Doomed one, which I got for Christmas. I want to give that a go. And, I'm always kind of keen to try and get together with people and play more like card games and stuff like that. So I'm trying to get that stuff organized and get people together for that. So we'll see if we manage to do that. We got real close to having a situation where all 3 Disc and Dice members were going to be in the same place at the same time and might have even played a game, but then COVID stopped us from doing that.
Absolutely. Well, I'm really, really looking forward to hear about all that.
But yeah, I think that's about us done for this episode. So again, as we said at the start, Happy New Year to everyone. Welcome back to Disc and Dice. We're here for another year. We're getting real close to that 50th episode, so we'll have to start thinking about something special to do. But if you want to get in touch with us, you've got any questions for us, any suggestions of things we might enjoy, you can always get in touch with us at a bunch of different places. The easiest is probably email, so it's discanddice@gmail.com. We're also on all of the social media places, so you can find us on Facebook, you can find us on YouTube, you can find us on Instagram, and basically anywhere you can find us. We appreciate, a follow, a like, a subscribe, all that kind of stuff. We love hearing from people. We also have our Discord channel, Raptor Mountain, so you can find the details for that in the episode description wherever you're listening to the podcast. So join us in any of those places, get in touch with us. The show is always better when we have a bit of interaction from you guys, so we really love and appreciate that stuff. But that's going to be it for this week, so we'll see everyone in a couple of weeks, hopefully with the full crew again.
Hopefully. Goodbye.
See you later.